Hello, everyone. I'm Randy Arrington, and welcome to the 27th episode of Page Valley Living. We're here today at Lake Arrowhead, just outside of Luray, to learn more about the world of amateur radio operators. Since the days of Marconi's first transmission, amateurs have contributed to the world of radio science, and in times of crisis, they have proven to be the only reliable means of communication. When Puerto Rico suffered a major hurricane in recent years that wiped out its entire infrastructure, it was amateur radio operators who were brought to the island to help FEMA with communications during the recovery effort. Today we'll be talking with members of the Page Valley Amateur Radio Club, like Will Baukhages here, and the group formed back in 2008. During the fourth week of June each year, the group's 24 members participate in an annual field day hosted by the Amateur Radio Relay League, a nationwide organization overseeing amateur radio. During field day, members will be trying to make contact with as many other hams as they can in a 24-hour period that begins at 2 p.m. Saturday and goes through 2 p.m. on Sunday. But in the age of instant digital communication, all at our fingertips, why would you still spend a bunch of money on equipment just to talk over the radio? Well, we're going to talk about all of that and so much more in just a moment. But first, let's take a quick look at this week's headlines. And now, looking back at the week that was in the Page Valley. During the Stanley Council's monthly meeting earlier in June, Andrea Good presented preliminary plans to operate a recovery home at 270 West Main Street. The home of Gene Good was the first home donated to the Valley's Rise Above Foundation to provide a proper environment for those recovering from addiction. The recovery facility would serve only males. Successful applicants would enter a 14-week plan and learn techniques for sobriety. While no action was taken by the Stanley Council, the project will require a rezoning request and a special use permit to operate a recovery facility. Page County Public Schools issued a letter earlier this month announcing the hiring of Dr. Brian Hubert as the next Assistant Superintendent of Instruction, Accountability, and Innovation. He most recently served as Assistant Superintendent of Greene County Public Schools and replaces Gabby Ryman, who served in the position for 2 years and has now accepted a position with Prince William County Public Schools. The deadline has closed for candidates in municipal races featured on the November ballot. Town council races in Stanley and Shenandoah feature uncontested races, while Luray will see a two-way race for mayor between council members Ron Vickers and Stephanie Lillard, and a five-way race for 3 council seats among incumbents Jason Pettit and Joey Sowers, and challengers Wendy Holtzman, Robert Spencer, and Charles Butler. Candidates in a special election in Stanley to fill the unexpired term of the late Dwayne Lehman still have until Friday, August the 16th to file paperwork with the county's voter registrar to challenge appointee Robin Good for that seat. On Thursday, the Federal Bureau of Investigation's Richmond Field Office and the U.S. Attorney's Office of the Western District of Virginia announced that Walter Leo Jackson Sr. was the man who on Memorial Day weekend in 1996 sexually assaulted and murdered 2 women hiking in Shenandoah National Park. DNA evidence linked the serial rapist to the 20-year-old cold case. Jackson, who was serving a 20-year prison sentence for rape and murder in Ohio, died in prison in 2018. Finally, the Page County Board of Supervisors is expected to make a final decision on the fate of the Luray Page County Visitor Center on Monday night. County officials have stated that their intentions to take over operations of the Visitor Center and relocate it from the historic train depot to retail space on Main Street. The Luray Council, who owns the train depot, went into closed session on Tuesday to discuss the matter, but took no action. The town is waiting to see what action the county takes on Monday, but town officials have pledged to make an effort to keep the depot open if the county moves forward with relocating the Visitors Center. In the world of sports, on Monday night, recent LHS graduate Hazel Parlett announced that she is signed to play collegiate women's soccer at Bluefield University. The Luray alum will receive more than $50,000 towards her education over 4 years, as she hopes to help the NAIA school build up a program that has only won 3 games in the last 6 seasons. Parlett will report to Bluefield on August the 5th, and the Rams' first game is on August the 15th. And now looking at the weekend ahead in the Page Valley. On Friday, June 28th, it's Rich Follet who is performing at Skyline in San Antonio National Park from 7 to 9 p.m. On Saturday, June 29th, Lisbeth Sable and Casey Firkin will be performing at Skyline from 7 to 9. Music Under the Arbor will be from 5 to 7 p.m. at Wisteria Farm and Vineyard on Marksville Road near Stanley. And a recital will be at the Luray Singing Tower at 7 p.m. on Saturday. Then they'll have another recital at the Luray Singing Tower on Sunday, June 30th at 3 p.m. And that's the headlines from the past week in the Page Valley. Episode 27 of Page Valley Living is being recorded on Saturday, June the 22nd, and will air on Wednesday, June the 26th. And we're back here at Lake Arrowhead. It's field day with amateur radio operators. We're with Will Baukhages of the Page Valley Amateur Radio Club. Will, thanks so much for being with us today.
My pleasure.
Now, let me ask you a very important question before we get started to go to anything else. Could you have at least picked a little warmer day for this?
Yeah. Well, unfortunately, picking the day is not up to us. That's
okay.
The Amateur Radio Relay League, who's the umbrella organization for amateur radio in the United States, has chosen the 4th weekend of June as the date for field day.
And what is the purpose of field day? What are you here to accomplish?
Well, it's kind of multifaceted one. It's encourages groups like our club, the Page Valley Amateur Radio Club, to get together, to get out in the field, hence the field day moniker, and to put up antennas, portable power, and to get on the air, and also ideally to do it in a public place so that we can interact with the public.
Y'all got here early hanging up antennas and trees and stuff there, didn't you?
Yeah, we had a few members that were here about 7, 8 o'clock this morning that got to work putting some antennas up.
Outstanding. And you're going to be here for 24 hours straight from 2 p.m. on Saturday to 2 p.m. on Sunday trying to make contacts.
Correct.
Now, what are contacts? Are you just looking for intelligent life, or what are...
Well, that's debatable. No, the idea of a contact is that there's basically an exchange of information involving a call sign, which is our unique identifier that's issued actually by the FCC.
Okay.
An acknowledgement of that, and then some information that kind of gives our location and kind of our setup.
Now, you talked about the identifier for the club, which I believe is N4PMH, am I correct?
K4PMH.
K4PMH. Now, tell me a little bit about that, because this goes back and traces the club back to Page Memorial Hospital, right?
Correct. So the initial amateur radio operators that formed the Page Valley Amateur Radio Club, so when you apply for a license for the FCC, either as an individual or an organization, a club, you're issued, it's not really random, but you're given a call sign by the FCC. And you have the option for the club, or depending on your level of license, to apply for what's known as a vanity call sign.
Okay.
So the original members decided, because they had a relationship with Page Memorial Hospital, that they applied for K4PMH.
And that being originally where this came from, and you're employed by Valley Health, is that correct?
I am, yeah.
And you also work with their amateur radio equipment and doing tests and drills, is that correct? Periodically?
Correct. And I do that as a volunteer. It has nothing to do with my employment. It's
right. And they have you told me, a network of about 14 regional hospitals that keep up with this sort of a backup communications, right?
Correct. There are within the northwestern Virginia, I think it's 14. It's thereabouts 14 that have similar capabilities that could provide communications if the needs arise.
And that's what a lot of folks probably don't realize here, is that this, if there's a blackout, there's no internet, there's no power, as long as you got a 12 volt battery, you can communicate pretty much around the world, right?
Essentially, yeah. I mean, there are some limitations here and there, but that's the idea, yeah. Yeah.
And there's always been, going back to almost Marconi or a little bit after Marconi, there's been bandwidths that have dedicated to amateur radio, if I'm not mistaken. And the FCC still monitors that? Is that correct?
Well, the FCC is the federal licensing, so they basically divvy up the bands, so to speak, between commercial interests, military, law enforcement, those kind of things, and then amateur radio. They weren't around from the beginning, but as following the initial, Marconi's first transatlantic transmission, and then kind of the rise of that as a communications infrastructure, as well as what turned into amateur radio, there arose a need to kind of control, all of this RF radio frequency band, space, to keep it from being a free-for-all.
Right. Well, I tell you, it still has relevance today, and we're going to talk a little bit more about that in just a second. But you're here for 24 hours at Lake Arrowhead, just outside of Luray, trying to make these contacts. Now, how many would you expect to make? How many contacts do you make usually in those 24 hours?
We usually make a few hundred contacts. It kind of
and how far out are we going? Venus, Uranus?
Not quite.
We're not making that far.
No, we will.
Okay.
The bulk of our contacts will be North America, United States, Canada, the Caribbean. But there are we can usually pretty easily get into Europe.
Well, not to get too deep into the radio science, and this is only really technical question I may ask, but I thought it was really interesting what you were saying to me, that if you have voice-to-voice communication, it is a larger bandwidth, and it doesn't maybe travel as far as if you're doing Morse code, which would use less of a bandwidth and can travel farther, and that's how people are able to talk to Australia or wherever.
Correct, yeah. Morse code, or CW as it's known, the mode itself, but Morse code being basically the language that you use, is basically just like an on-off switch.
Okay.
Right? So that signal goes a lot further because it's not trying to modulate all of the intricacies of the human voice.
Now, I got an iPhone. I can FaceTime almost anyone in the world. Anytime I want, I can text them, I can call them, I can record a video and send it to them. Why would I spend all this money on radio equipment to talk on the radio, even though I started in radio at 19 and it is my first love still? But why would the average person want to talk on the radio like this?
Well, you can do all of those things until you can't. I think it wasn't all that long, but earlier this year when I forget what the exact issue was, where quite a few users, subscribers of cell phone, internet, suddenly couldn't use any of that. And that was because, all of that stuff relies on an infrastructure. Right. Something happens with that infrastructure, be it equipment failure or something more catastrophic.
Or a hurricane knocks out a whole island.
Or a hurricane storm knocks down power lines and communication lines. And that's one of the things with the cell phone, it goes from your phone to a tower, but then it goes to a wire. Right. Or a fiber optic line. Something happens to that, then here we're going literally from this box through that wire up to a piece of wire that's strung around these trees and then out into the ether, so to speak.
How much, if somebody wanted to get into this, I'm going to call it a hobby, with the utmost respect, how much would it cost to get into a hobby like that?
Well, it's a matter of degrees. There is a few different ways to approach it. If you're trying to replicate a setup like this, if you wanted to buy brand new equipment, you're talking several hundred to a couple $1,000s, depending on how you go about it. There's
then you got the antenna.
And that would include the antenna.
Oh, okay,
and like this antenna that we use was basically homemade.
Okay.
So it's the cost of materials and some time. Obviously we didn't make this.
Right.
But
well, how about if somebody wanted to be a member of the Page Valley Amateur Radio Club? Who would they contact? What would they do?
Well, you can show up in person to one of our meetings.
Okay.
Or we also have we're on Facebook and we have a website. It's currently a Google site, but if you just search for Page Valley Amateur Radio Club, you should be able to find that site and you can contact us through there. We have ask for dues of a whopping $12 a year to be a
All
member.
right, okay.
You do not
$1
have
a month.
Yeah,
All right,
you do not
all
have
right.
to be a licensed amateur radio operator to join. I wasn't when I first joined. So.
That's even cheaper than Save the Manatee.
Yep.
But hey, we're going to take a real quick break right here. Will you stick around and play a game called the 5 W's with us?
Sure.
All right, we're going to do that in just a moment. But first, we would like to invite local businesses to consider being a sponsor of Page Valley Living. Each week we explore a different issue important to the people of Page Valley, and our viewership is growing. Each episode remains in our YouTube channel library indefinitely. So consider helping us keep this segment of our local news coverage alive, and consider a new medium for your marketing. Monthly rates are available. And now back to William Baukhages from the Page Valley Amateur Radio Club and the 5 W's. I'm going to ask you 5 simple questions focusing on the who, what, when, where, and why. Are you ready?
Yes.
All right, here we go. Who first inspired you to become an amateur radio operator?
Honestly, I'd have to say myself.
Okay. You like to tinker with things.
I've always
Kind of
been
a young Sheldon?
Well, I don't know if I go that far. I was one of those kids that used to take stuff apart to figure out how it worked, and sometimes I was able to get it back together.
What is the purpose of this club, or the goals of this club?
The goals of this club are basically to foster the science and community of amateur radio, and to put that out there.
When did you make your first contact?
My first contact personally was in early 2015.
All right. You always remember your first, don't you? Where was the farthest contact located that you've ever located?
Probably New Zealand. I think
New
that's,
Zealand.
Yeah.
Wow. Did you talk to anybody from Lord of the Rings?
No.
Okay. All right. And finally, we end on why. Will, thank you. You've been very kind with your time today. We always end on the why question. Why do you do this?
It's fun.
Yeah. And that's a wrap. So, hey, we want to say thanks to Will Baukhages here and all the folks here with the Page Valley Amateur Radio Club. It's field day out in Lake Arrowhead today on June 22nd. We are going to be filming this the week after, but it's a great event. They usually do this every year. You ought to inquire if you're interested in this with the folks of the Page Valley Amateur Radio Club. Thanks for spending some time today with us, Will. We also want to say thanks to Eleanor Arrington for all of her work behind the camera today. If you liked today's segment, make sure you hit that like button. Also subscribe to our YouTube channel at Page Valley News, and if you liked it, share it with a friend as well. And as always, help out our furry friends down at the Page County Animal Shelter and help them find a forever home. Until next week, I'm Randy Arrington saying enjoy that Page Valley living.